All right. So, like I said, tonight, what I want to do is go over just the basic Fusion interface, which is words. Be a little more in depth. I know we already covered this, but I want to make sure to just have a fresh video and all of that. So let me flip over and share my screen, and we will do exactly that. All righty. So standard interface for every Fusion excuse me, platform. Mac will be a little different from Windows, vice versa. Pretty minor changes, but there'll be a couple of different things. Just so you know, also, and I'll go over this again later, how to. But yes, these are all very minimal icon amount, or very minimal icon or tool icons. Sorry, but that is because Fusion is designed to be a more of interpretive CAD program. Again, CAD, computer-aided design. But what that means is you can modify all of these. It also means that it tries to keep a minimal amount of tools at the ready, so it doesn't clutter up your interface. Other programs have all available tools pretty much at all time. Others are by drop down and by search function. There's obviously a variety of different interfaces. We're going to focus on Fusion. So first thing, I just want to kind of go around the screen here, starting at the top left. This grid matrix panel here, that is your data panel and team selection. I just sent out the invites. When you get those, you'll be able to click that. First thing is the drop down at the top left-hand corner. This is how you switch between your personal storage and your shared team. In this case, we're using BSU, 3D modeling, 3D printing, all that. Major downside, one of the things that Fusion has not added to its functionality yet is being able to actively link a file you are working on in your own team with a shared team. In order to get your personal files onto the shared team, you have to download the thing locally and re-upload, because reminder that Fusion is a cloud storage service or cloud storage program. Great thing about that is your computer goes down, whatever, you can just log into another computer that already has it Fusion loaded, sign in, bam, all your stuff is available, and you can switch between your personal and shared teams. But that's one of the, gonna be pros and cons to everything. So that's one of the things with having cloud storage. But you'll be able to jump back and forth. And for me, I've got a bunch of them saved because of all the classes I've been teaching. But this one is just ours. Fall 2022, ARTS299, CS1, and this folder will fill up with more folders. But for right now, number one is the extruded badge project. We'll get to that in a minute. So that's your data panel. Next to that is your standard save situation, as in, you got your new page, new designs, electronic designs. Yes, you can actually design PC boards in Fusion. We're not going to be getting to that. You have a library, all that kind of stuff. Your save as. There are exports and 3D print options. Export the file. 3D print, you can actually send this directly to a printer. Fusion 360 has a built-in slicer program. I don't usually use it. We will address it at some point, but I usually use external programs for that. And then there's some other stuff that's your standard things. But dropping down from there, in the actual interface is the hierarchy tree. Now, right now, obviously it's blank. Right here to the left, sure, just here to the left, you'll see this little square icon with an eyeball to the left of it and a little dot to the right of it. It says unsaved. That is because the thing is currently unsaved. As soon as you save with either a Control S or Command S if you're on Apple, or or obviously hitting save, brings up your standard save window. Then you just say, we'll just go test, and that's going to drop it into the folder that was already in, or of course you can use a drop down and put it elsewhere, but we're just going to stick that there for now. Now you'll see that test piece says, or now the untitled says test. Next one down is document settings. Open this drop down. This is your units. Now its default setting is millimeters. I highly recommend leaving it in millimeters because most of your slicer programs, which is, if you're unfamiliar with, slicer programs are what prepares a 3D model for 3D printing. Effectively, think of a slicer program as when you're printing a regular piece of paper document, it is one single flat page. Slicer literally takes your 3D model and slices it into a stack of pages. That's how it interprets it. But most of those slicer programs, I know it's very clever terminology, are in metric. You can change it. You can change the model mid-project. If you're working on this and, oh crap, I've actually, the material I'm going to build this out of, if you're actually building something and not 3D printing it, is all fractional. Okay, well, click the little pencil box, or the little pencil icon, pencil paper. Fusion will open, and of course it's got my little floating head there. Fusion opens pop-up toolboxes. Sometimes that really can clutter the screen, but that's how it functions. It opens up different toolboxes. So you can obviously change it from centimeters, millimeters, meters, inch, foot. I'm going to leave mine in millimeters. I recommend it, but it is not an absolute requirement. You can change back and forth with no real distortion. The only issue is some slicer programs might have some weird interpretation issues. The only thing I've run into is it doesn't mess up the model, it messes up the scale of the model. And if that ends up being the issue, you can just scale up the model in the slicer program. Issue there does come in is if you actually need a specific value, like I'm making this so it fits inside of something else. You don't really want to estimate that. So just stuff to keep in mind. All right. Next up is your named views. If you are unfamiliar with CAD programs, it doesn't matter. Your standard view is going to be all of this, just your grid layout. A lot of CAD programs actually make use of orthogonal views, which is orthogonal meaning straight on. I know it doesn't actually mean that, but close enough. If you go all the way to the bottom center here, you'll see this viewport icon. Click that, and you can either use the hotkey Shift exclamation point or Shift 1. I don't know why it does that. Or hit that, and it'll switch over to 4 views. So you can see one object in 4 views simultaneously, which default is top, side, front, and then perspective. But that's going to be up to you. You choose how you want to see the thing. I'm going to shift back. I'm usually going to be using perspective, just how that works. Speaking on how you view things, next up is the view cube. Your hierarchy tree will grow as we add more stuff in there. We'll explain it as we go for that. But on the opposite side of the screen is this view cube, this little cube with that says top, front, right, and home. There's a little home icon. You can grab this, left click, hold your mouse, and drag it around. This is how you will orbit around an object. You can press home or F6. That will snap it back to perspective view. If you do not have a mouse and you're just using a trackpad, one, I do highly recommend a mouse. If you don't have one, if you click down here at the center, orbit, now I can click and hold orbit, same deal. That's basically all. To get out of that, just hit escape. You're all set. Again, you can hit F6 or hit the home button and it'll snap back. To pan, press and hold shift, then left click, or sorry, center click. No, sorry, I got my wires crossed in my head. It's not shift, it's control. Sorry about that. Press and hold control. Press and hold center mouse, and you can pan. Same thing here. If you go down to your center bar here, hit the little hand icon. Now you can pan without holding a keyboard or anything. So you're going to have your variety of viewpoints and such here. Speaking of the center stuff, bottom center, you have zoom in, zoom out, or if you have a click wheel mouse, you obviously have the scrolling wheel. There you go. There are a bunch of other settings to customize how you like to see your project. Click the little monitor icon. You can see your visual style. Nothing's going to change on this because I don't have any objects or anything built into this yet. But you have different ways of seeing your work. Just shaded. The default is shaded with edges, which means it's just going to show like major contour edges and such. Then you also have environment. That just changes the background and such. Just maybe the default gray is a little awkward to look through, that sort. I'm going to leave it on this photo booth. Effects, there's a bunch of other stuff, visibility, cameras, and all that. We're not really going to deal with all that stuff. So that's your basic layout. The one last thing I want to show you on this is your timeline. Now, currently, it is blank. Down in the bottom left-hand corner, you'll see your standard sort of play, snap left, snap forward, snap back, and then snap to end and snap to end. As we do stuff on here, more icons will appear, and this line will grow. You can cycle through that, and then you can also make changes like splicing actions inside and in between things. Or you can basically mute things, which is called suppress in Fusion. So like, say I wanted to put a curve on this thing that I just built. I rounded out the edges. Great, but I found out later that I really needed to have like added a hole near the corner, but that rounded over thing is messing with me. Well, what you do is you can move the time slider back before you put that curve, then add the hole, snap back to current, it'll recalculate all the stuff you've added. And if there's issues, there'll be issues you have to correct, but you can drop actions in between actions. So it's really convenient. The basic layout of all the tools, we're going to go over these as we build through projects and such. But one of the things I really enjoy about Fusion is that it's built to be very accessible for newcomers and advanced people alike. So if you mouse over any tool, a drop-down window will open, and it'll give you an explanation of what the tool is, as well as a diagram. So really convenient for that. Best thing I can tell you right now is if you're curious about a lot of stuff, spend some time just mousing over stuff. If you are familiar with CAD programs, or you have worked with other CAD programs, I will warn you now, Fusion has the same stuff, but sometimes they use different vocabulary for the same action. Like if you're familiar at all, a Boolean action in standard CAD work is under the combine tool. Just one of those things. If you're not familiar with those actions, then don't worry about it. But just telling you now, if you're looking for something, it might be, and you can't find it, it might be because Fusion uses different vocabulary for tools. That's all. So we'll go over all of these things, but basically your standard format of building something is you start with a sketch, just lines, dimensions, that such. You can extrude that sketch, which takes the two-dimensional drawing into 3 dimensions, which is what our first assignment is. There's revolve, which is what our second assignment is. Taking that sketch, and instead of going straight up, you actually rotate it around. You can put holes and stuff. You can put patterns, and you can make patterns. Form is something entirely different. That is at more your organic sculpting interface. Mirroring things, or just creating basic forms like cylinders, squares, or cube, boxes, spheres, toruses, donuts, coils, pipes, and thicken. You have your modifiers, you have your assemblies and stuff like that. The drop downs there gives you all the tools available. And then if you mouse over, sometimes you mouse over, you'll see an arrow. It's not like it's a surprise. You'll see an arrow for an expansion on the drop down. These are all customizable. I mean, what tools are standard available to you? Now, Fusion will resize depending on your screen. So if you have a wide screen, you have more tools visible on the toolbar up here. If you have a smaller screen, fewer. That's all. But you can add and subtract tools to that. Say like it's something you use quite often. So let's say I use actually sweep quite often. If you mouse over one of these drop-down tools, you'll see a little vertical ellipses. These 3 dots appear. Left click that, and open another box appears. You have pin to toolbar, pin to shortcuts. Pin to toolbar is exactly what it sounds like. It just added sweep to the toolbar. So that's how you can add and subtract tools. The other one is pin to shortcuts. Shortcuts is exactly what it is. That's normal. And anything else, shortcut, hotkeys, that sort. In Fusion, it is just the letter S. Boop. New toolbox appears. That's how you can search for stuff. There's your search bar. This is all covered in the terminology, the initial glossary pages on Blackboard, but we'll be going over this stuff as we move along. So that's the really basic layout of Fusion. A little more in-depth detail, but pretty much what's all going to get you started. Main thing again, save what you're doing, you'll move along. One quick thing on saving before we go on that, or before we stop here. Fusion will save automatically. That can be a good or an irritating thing. What I mean by that is, when you go to close Fusion, it will automatically save changes and such. Cool, except if you didn't mean to make those changes or something. So that's a mildly irritating thing. But it also means that you're not going to lose your data, especially since it's not even locally saved. It is cloud stored. Other thing, we'll say it real quick. Let me just make like a couple of objects here. Give it a dimension and a vertical dimension. See, whenever you add something, a toolbox pops up. Okay, great. And you'll see here the icon showed up in the timeline. Great. But one of the things I want to show you is if I open up the data panel here, you'll see this project test. To the bottom right is V1. It will save the actual individual save points. So now that I've made a change to the file, go ahead and hit save. You can add descriptions here. It'll default say user saved. We'll just say cylinder, if I can spell. Cylinder added, hit OK. It updates. You'll see the cylinder appear in the icon there. There wasn't anything there before. Also, V2 has appeared. Open this drop down. This is how it shows you what you can cycle back and forth to. So far, the only save points I have made are the original save point just to start the file, and then that one change. You can snap back to these, use the ellipses, open the original. It will give you a warning. Yeah, man. Of course, also you are limited to your own bandwidth and the computer you're working on, and this workstation is not exactly made for modeling and such. Awesome, computer error. That's what you want to see on a recording. That's about right. Okay, I don't know. It crashed. That figures. Anyway, you can move back to previously saved editions using the drop down there, and of course, clicking on the triple dot there, and it'll give you those selections. So that's what that is. We'll obviously be going into those more details more often. Yes.
So you can just do that on the timeline anyways?
Yes, but say you made some serious alterations, because there are some things that do not show up on the timeline. So the question was, could you just, instead of like going back to previous files, can I just move the timeline slider? Yes, you can, but sometimes you've made serious changes to a project, and there are some actions that are not timeline etched. Like, yes, when I add an object or modify an object, something like that, those add icons. I think we crashed entirely. Nope. Yep, that's about right. So let me pause this recording. All right, so just to finish up that question, yeah, what had happened when the computer froze, all that didn't matter. But the question was, going back through the time slider, is that not the same as just going through your versions? No, sometimes the file gets saved as corrupted. Maybe there was something that was not a saved icon, because things like sketches and organic sculpting in the form space, things like that, it's not a saved set of actions. You're just working within that set. You're just working within that workspace. So the only way to alter that going back through actions is either, if you're still open, you can Control Z your way, or Command Z your way back through stuff. But sometimes you might actually have to go back to a previous version before you made all those changes, because it's not something you can cycle through. So that's all. All right. So those are just the basics and some stuff on saving. And hey, we found some way where you can overload the program again. But that is largely because, again, the computer I'm currently working on is not a very powerful one. So these things happen. So all right, that's the layout. I didn't restart the screen sharing, but that's okay. All right. So that's the layout. If there's any questions, of course, ask me, or as always, or as I'm going to repeatedly say, pretty much the first video, I'm not going to be the only source of information for this program, for this course. I very much encourage you to also look at other videos and such. Autodesk Fusion has an excellent video series on working with Fusion. Plenty of other people have created their own accounts on YouTube and such, some of which have actually been hired by Fusion and Autodesk at this point and make videos. I certainly don't take offense. These videos in class tend to be a bit longer, again, because we are also addressing some issues and such. Other ones are going to be a lot more to the point and shorter. Multiple sources of information are always a good thing, as long as they're all saying the same thing. So use what I say, use what other people say. I certainly don't take it personally. You're trying to learn this stuff. So best of luck with all of it. And there we go.